So welcome, Dr. Beth, to Raw and Cooked Vegan.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's great to have you. Great to have you. I think you might have seen one video. I'm not sure, but the way I usually start these is just hear a little bit about how you were raised and if your family had any awareness of nutrition or fitness.
I was raised typical American diet.
Okay.
That's how I was raised. My first awareness of the animal products came when I was probably a preteen, where I found out how the calves were just in this little stall. And when I found out, I never ate veal again. It was just absolutely repulsive to me.
So you were like 11 or 12 when you.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then when I was 13, I went to Germany, and we were at a restaurant, and they had some sort of meat. And I had never tasted it before, and I asked what it was, and it turned out to be deer meat. And I was scandalized. I had one bite, and so I made a differentiation between some animals and some things, but I didn't make the whole thing until later, when I was in my late teens.
Okay, that's pretty good for a 12-year-old, though. That's a lot better than I did. Okay, so later in your teens, at about what age did you go like full? Well, first let me ask you. So your parents kind of just cooked a standard American diet. It was dairy products, meat, maybe processed foods. No awareness. Like they tried to do maybe a healthy meal according to what the standard was.
That's exactly. I grew up with just my mom, and she tried to do healthy best they knew at the time, but it was standard American diet healthy. So it's all the normal stuff. Okay. And I certainly had my share of fast food during the week as a teenager, especially after I was driving. Okay. So, yeah.
All right. And did you get involved in sports at all when you were young? Were you pretty athletic?
I was athletic. I didn't stay on sports teams because I had a heart defect that we didn't know that I had from a birth defect, a hole in my heart, that was actually fixed when I was 27.
Okay.
But I was pretty active, and I loved cycling. I loved soccer. I loved softball.
Okay. And could you characterize your health generally? So it sounds like you had a heart impairment, which may have arisen in terms of reduced capacity compared to other folks. Is that why that kind of? But how about any other illnesses that you might associate with diet as you grew up?
Not as I grew up. Later in the picture, when I had a break, I went paleo for a while, which was horrible. And so I can tell you about that later, but not younger.
Okay. All right. So then if your first awareness came at like 12 years of age, and then a few years later, did you decide to become vegetarian or vegan, or how did that happen?
I went vegetarian, and it was right after I graduated high school, started college, got my own place, but I was a poor college student, so I lived literally, it was spinach noodles and Italian dressing. And, there's not balance, it's not healthy, and I got sick, and so I went back to, I guess, a healthier version of an American diet. And which is when I met my husband, who is not vegan. Great. So then soon afterwards, I went vegetarian and then vegan a few years later.
Okay. And at that time, was it at all difficult to make those changes? Did it come pretty easily to you?
No, it comes really easily to me. I get tired. When I ate meat, I would get tired of eating. I don't have a grand attraction to it.
Yeah.
What I have the attraction to is the things like the fried stuff, if there's a meat in some sort of sauce or the fry. So that wasn't a problem. What the problem with the hardship for me, I think, was that my body doesn't quite function now, even though everything's totally fixed from the surgery. The things with me before the surgery and after is that it takes a little more nutritional balancing for me.
Okay.
And so I had to learn. It took a learning curve to be at my best health.
Okay.
Certainly surpassed anything that I ate on even a healthy. I went healthy diet before I went vegetarian, vegan in my adults. So it surpasses any of that.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Now, you kind of told me a little bit earlier that you eventually got so big in the raw movement, you were inviting people to come to your area and that sort of thing. So it sounds like, just to get the chronology right, it sounds like in your 21, 22, you became vegan, maybe 20?
Vegetarian, and then when did I go vegan? I'm terrible with dates, so I apologize.
That's okay.
Probably around 95, 96, okay. Something like that.
And it sounds like for you, was the primary motivation ethics?
Originally, it was ethics and health as well. And when I was going back and forth, because I didn't just make, some people can do it overnight and stay there. I wasn't one of them. And so it was health eventually that drove me there. And at the very end of it, it's ethics that keeps me there.
Yeah.
But yeah, originally it was my original long-term stint. It was because of health.
Okay. So then what happened that, it sounds like you were doing vegan for a while before you went raw. Can you characterize a little bit how this transition from SAD to vegetarian to vegan, how did it affect your health initially? Would you characterize it as a high fat or a kind of cooked vegan with maybe not as pure or as healthy as you're doing now with the raw, right?
Oh yeah. Originally when I went vegan, I was just using all the replacers, the cheese replacers, the meat replacers,
yeah.
And so it was not particularly healthy, but I thought I was doing great.
Okay.
And then when I read the Nature's First Law book, and I thought that sounds really good, and the clean body and the cooked food is poison, which I don't believe now, but that was where I was then.
Right.
And so I went raw. I got really into juicing. We got a second refrigerator. I would juice like 30 pounds of carrots a week.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually started turning a bit orange. I looked tan all the time or something. And that was really, really good. I was so into it that when my guys were little, when my firstborn, the doctor, I decided when I actually saw what was in the formula ingredients, I took him off formula and put him on blended, because he was getting a little bit older, blended, pureed, raw, natural food and juices that I made from the blender. When I talked to my doctor about it, he's like, you can't do that. He's not going to get what he needs. I'm like, the formula is 98% oil and it's in sugar and it's sprayed with vitamins. And, I would be in the 98th percentile of weight if I ate Twinkies all the time, but that's not healthy. So anyway, he did great after. So my kids' early years were very, very high raw, very high raw. And, they're still, they switched between which one's a vegetarian. One had 7 years of a vegan, and he's not vegan now. He's very much plant-based, though.
Okay.
So they've been very healthy.
Okay. And would you characterize both pregnancies, your diet during the pregnancies was cooked vegan?
My diet, no, during the pregnancies, I succumbed to the thought, there were several times in my life, 3 times that I'm thinking of, that I went off the vegetarian path.
Okay.
One was when I was on the spinach noodles. The other one was my first pregnancy. Was right after a heart surgery to correct the birth defect, and I bought into, you have to have the meat protein, the animal protein. But then after he was born, I went back vegetarian. So vegan. I went back vegan. So,
okay. So did your heart surgery, did that occur between pregnancies, or was it after your second child?
It was before my first one.
Okay. Okay. All right. So maybe we should talk about that a little bit. So you were cooked vegan when you had, or were you raw by the time you were diagnosed with this issue and they said you had to have surgery?
I was not raw yet. No.
Okay. Okay. And that sounds like a pretty intense surgery. What was that like?
It was, actually, I've been told that I'm a miracle to be alive. They expected I had atrial septal defect, which usually is a pin-size hole. They thought it would be the size of a dime. When they got me in, it was actually the size of $50. I was missing the chamber between the left and right wall of my heart, and they surgery lasted, a good part of the day. And but back to the diet and exercise that I was doing before, because also by that time I was very into the exercise and weights and aerobics, and the doctor would bring in his medical students specifically. It was not a teaching hospital, but he would bring him into my room and say, this is an example of a healthy heart. And even though I was in heart failure, and I shouldn't have been alive and everything, the actual heart and my recovery was very, very fast. It was double the time half the time that it would have been for most people. And my pain levels were less afterwards. They were amazed. And the heart itself apparently looked very good, despite there was there was enlargement because of the problem, but the actual, the fat around the heart and whatever, the heart was very good because of, I think, my diet and my lifestyle. And so my recovery was fast. And obviously the pregnancies, 3 months after the heart surgery was when I got pregnant with my first son. So very, very healthy. I think it helped me recover. Definitely.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, I should probably get this in before we move on, and that is your studies in college. So you have a doctorate. Can you tell the viewers what the doctorate said?
Yeah, that's in psychology, and then later I got certification in plant-based nutrition.
Okay.
And that's been fabulous.
Is that Colin Campbell's program?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I want to hear about that. Okay. So now it's interesting. You had this intense surgery, and then did you say 3 months later you conceived, or you were? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yep. 3 months later, I conceived, and I was very quickly. As soon as back then, you had to have 10 weeks of bed rest. I think it's like 4 or 5 now, but I was chomping at the bit. I immediately went back to work. I started cycling. I was going up hills that I was having to pant before. I mean, I was zooming around and. Back to a healthy diet. Yeah.
That's great. So after this surgery, this was like a big success, and your heart felt totally different.
Yeah. I mean, my energy was different. I couldn't actually feel the difference in my heart itself, but my energy was through the roof, and I was like, wow. And the stamina, and I could do things that I guess I should have been able to do before with my training level. But all of a sudden, my heart could keep up. And so I was just zooming up these monster hills and things like that.
All right. All right. So then the next thing that might be interesting is you started this first pregnancy. And how would you characterize your diet? So you had the pregnancy, and at some time during the pregnancy, the doctors convinced you should start having protein, or was it after delivery? Or
No. After delivery, I went back to I went to a vegan diet after pregnancy. No, but during it, especially because I had all the heart thing, I just recovered, and so it was, I don't know, it was not very long into the pregnancy, a few months into the pregnancy that I had to add. And it was very hard. I'm remembering the feelings of having to do that, but so I did. And then as soon as he was born, I was like, we're back. Now I think I could do. I know better. I don't have to do that, but even if I didn't have the knowledge, I'm not sure I could do that now.
Okay. Now, how did you feel when you introduced those animal products? Did it affect you physically? Like you probably felt psychologically, okay, I'm doing the right thing, and now I should have all the nutrients I need. But how did it manifest in any negative ways? Like, did you start getting colds, or were you eating a lot of cheese, or was it just like you added some meat back in, or?
I added meat back in. I did not add. I may have had cheese. I know I didn't have milk.
Okay.
And I felt heavy, but I felt like it was either my child or the animals, and so
yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't. I don't remember being sick a huge amount during that, but I know now also it takes a while, so especially if you're fairly clean. If you're really, really clean, you can detox right away, but sometimes the body can process it for a while until it goes, okay, no more, I'm sick. And so it may have been that.
Okay. And you were also in a pretty high level of health already, so yeah. Okay, so you had your first child, and was it an easy delivery? It was pretty straight.
No, it was I was actually had to be induced early because he was 8.5. I'm really little. I'm about 5'1", and around 110, 113 pounds, and he was 8.5 pounds and growing a pound plus per week at that point in time. So I was induced, and inducing is usually, I think it was like a 14-hour labor. Now my second one got pregnant 10 weeks to a couple months later. There's 14 months in between my kids.
Okay.
With my next child, and that delivery was quite easy.
Okay. All right, and you started to talk about the formula and how you abandoned that, and then were you able to breastfeed for a certain period of time, or how did that work?
Yeah, I did. I did for a certain period of time, and then a couple months again, and then after that, I know people do it for a lot longer, and I was encouraged to, but it just didn't work for my lifestyle at the time, which is when I put them on the formula. And soon after is when I saw the formula ingredients, and I thought, this cannot be healthy.
Okay, all right. And then can you assess or give a summary of your sons? You have 2 sons, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so how did their health do on this when you transitioned from formula to the kind of juices and a more raw diet? Did you notice any improvements in his health?
Oh yeah, they didn't get sick. I don't even remember when my youngest was about 2. He was just acting a little bit off, but he was dancing on the floor. I mean, he was just zooming around. He was acting off, and I took his temperature, and it was like 104. And I took him to the doctor. It turned out he had pneumonia.
Wow.
But he was doing all this with the pneumonia and with to where he had a little bitty cough and he was still moving and grooving. So yes, they did very well on it. The doctor was very concerned. My oldest was the first one that I pulled off. Oldest was when I pulled off the formula. And, he was very concerned, but my son did beautifully and was so healthy. The kids, they got over things very quickly.
That's a great point. It's not like it makes you superhuman. You can still catch a virus or have a bacterial growth, but it's kind of like you're in such a state of strength and health that it doesn't affect you like the average person.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I also, I believe it really helped them for their challenges, and it certainly helped me. I recover if I get sick, I recover very, very quickly.
Okay. Yeah. So and so all this time, would you say you're kind of refining and improving your diet, and then was it after your second son that you went fully raw yourself, or had you already done that by then?
I think it was after my second son that I went raw, and then I got really into the movement and was bringing the activists and the raw foodists, and Eric Marcus and David Wolf to Seattle to speak and organize in groups and working with Mercy for Animals and, you know, things like that. And, but something didn't click until later that I'll talk about when we get to the end of, you know, that story. But
yeah,
but something, even though, I guess I want to say this for those people, just because one of the things that people in this community think about is what about the people that, how can you possibly quit being vegan or stop being, something had not totally clicked at that point in time for me, even though I had all of the intellectual information.
Yeah, that's a great point, I think, and this can be a long process, and I think a lot of raw food leaders went through long processes before they came to where they are. That's really a great point for people. So, would you say that when you were in this phase, were you kind of a high-fat raw food diet? Were you into gourmet raw, that sort of thing?
That's what most of us were at that point back in 2000. I wouldn't say I did a whole lot of the gourmet stuff, but there was so much that was nut-based. When I look back, and I was on the boards then, I had I published 2 books. This is one of them. They're out of print. This was actually through Nature's First Law.
All right.
Their copyright.
That's so cool.
2 books back then, and was just really into the movement. But when I look back at I would never eat that way now. It's so high fat. And that was one of the things after a few years, my energy, even though it started great on it because of the high fat and the imbalance. And most of us were told at that time, it's just detox, it's detox, it's detox. And, you know, a year and a half, you're still as detox. I'm doing worse than I was, you know.
Yeah.
So that eventually we thought, wow, gosh, this just wasn't healthy. Little did we know, but we do now.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that happens to a lot of people that try going raw. They end up eating too much fat, and then they get problems, and so they just go all the way back to an animal-based diet when if they just simply eliminate the fat, they'd feel great. Yeah.
Yes, because back then it was the nut loaves and the oil and the dressing and, the nuts on the salad and tons of seeds and tons of avocado.
Yeah. All right. Now, you said before your husband was not vegan. Over the years, has he been influenced by you at all?
Just lately, just in the last 2 years.
Okay.
He was just totally the typical red-blooded American. He thought he would just die if he didn't have meat at a meal, So, but just in the last few years, we've made tremendous strides.
So, I mean, he knew about these books you'd written and your own personal experiences. Was he supportive but not really willing to consider it for himself?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. He saw, that, I was healthy and this is what I was doing, but then again, he was like, well, you're you and I'm me, and, we have very different physical makeups, obviously, and so he just sort of attributed it to, well, that's what my wife does, and
yeah.
So
and were you the person that did most of the cooking for the family?
Yes, I did all the cooking, 99.5% of the time, and so that was actually another cookbook that I came out with in one of my phases where I was doing a vegetarian, but I wasn't raw, which was called Bipolar Cooking, which is when you have to cook for somebody else, how you can not do 2 separate meals and just have the same thing ready so your main dish, they can just quickly throw in whatever product that they want in it, but you've got something nice.
I think this is a common thing, and it's something I have to do. So I have to cook meat for my mom. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because obviously you had really strong feelings about this, not only for health reasons, but I imagine the ethical reasons became really powerful for you. So talk about being with someone you love and willing to compromise in that regard.
That was really hard. And it's funny during that time, now I don't cook meat. Even for, but there was many, many years, over a decade I did.
Yeah.
And, people either praised it or they, would shame me for it.
Right, right.
But when you're in a relationship, whatever that is, with a loved one, and that is what you feel like you need to do, and I felt that was fair. That's what I had always done, and I was not vegan when we met. And it wasn't for me to push the change on him. So it was absolutely an act of love to handle meat. Because there were certain things I couldn't cook because it would actually make me ill. But there was a handful of things I could cook, like just smell it would.
Yeah.
But the things that I could, to handle the meat, there was plenty of burgers I made just crying, with tears running down my eyes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's where I was, and it was something that I just felt like it wasn't fair just because I changed. Me cooking and our schedule and whatever was just such an integral part of our lives. For me to suddenly say I'm not doing it because I don't, it's against my ethics and whatever, but that imposes in on his life. So I think in everybody's life you have to find a line, what respects you and what respects them. Yeah. And as people find that line, sometimes you're going to err on this person's side, and then you're going to go over here. You're going to, finding that balance. But eventually the best balance that we found was if I made my meals and there was something easy to throw in to it that didn't take a lot of, work on my side, a lot of handling, let's say, on my side. Yeah. Where if I made a pasta, I would just throw in seafood in the pasta rather than having to think about a cow or, none of it is great to think about. It's all awful. But right. At that point in time, for a vegan, you're picking the lesser of evils. And you're trying to honor everybody involved the best that you can in an imperfect world, I guess. Yeah, and, I think you're probably not the only person who has been with a loved one, and at first they weren't really open or ready for the knowledge, but over time they became that way. Yes. So, and it could have been that long association with you that affected that transformation. Now I can't, you can't say that that'll definitely happen for everyone, but I think it happens fairly commonly. But you have to be willing to, if the person is worth it to you, then you stay in there, because it took more than a decade. Yeah. And he's still not, for a while he actually went almost completely vegan and 80-10-10, and the other stuff has creeped back into him in his life, but it's not at home. It's elsewhere, and that's his road. But so I think you just have to be willing to honor yourself and let that person have their journey. Yeah. And because go ahead. I'm sorry. So go ahead. Even if two vegans hook up, who's to say that vegan that you fall in love with, how many people are vegan for a while and then turn to be vegetarian or turn to eat animal products again? So there's no guarantee. Yeah. So that's right. That's right. And did that cause any friction at all in the way you were raising the boys? Did you say to him, look, I'll cook meat for you, but the boys are going to be vegan, or would he, if they showed an innocent interest in something, were you guys like, you can try it if you want? How did that go? Oh, no, we didn't have any conflict over the kids, and we let them make their own choice. And when my oldest was 7, I'm terrible with times now, but he was 9. He wrote he wanted to go vegetarian desperately, and there was this one meal, and he just said, I am tired of meat, or I don't want meat anymore, or something like that. Just very dogmatically. And so I had him read several books, pro and against, so he knew and was educated. And he actually wrote a paper which got the attention of Eric Marcus, which was really neat. And he was almost vegan, almost.
Okay.
Between a vegetarian and almost on the vegan side of vegetarian for a very long time. So now he's not quite as, but he's still very, very much. So I can see people's journeys go like that.
Yeah.
And my youngest is a vegetarian.
Okay. Okay. Now tell us a little bit about how you got to the plant-based thing and decided to take this course with Colin Campbell. It sounds like it was long leading up to that. What did you start to did books start coming out that were addressing this high-fat issue within the raw food diet? How did that go down?
Well, do you want me to, before that happened, I had my last stint as a not a vegan happened, and I did a year of when we learned out my youngest was celiac, and we found out at the same time that my husband was celiac, and I'm like, okay, how in the world can I be gluten-free vegan? I didn't know what I know now, and it just seemed absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
And so we tried a stint as paleo because that thing hadn't clicked that I'm talking about, and we both got so sick. First couple, maybe 2 months, 8 weeks or so, physically felt good. Got really, really, really sick afterwards. My husband even also got to where he almost couldn't function at work, foggy-headed.
And Dr. Beth, can you characterize, different people have different ideas as to what paleo means. Would you say that it was kind of, you probably were still doing a good amount of vegetables, and you would have meat with every meal, or you try and make it a high protein meal kind of thing? Is that